So I'm back with Rise and Decline of the Third Reich after a long gap over the winter. We're into spring 1940. I'm playing the short scenario that runs into 1942. And we begin with the year start sequence. Variants, we don't have any variants. And we don't resolve strategic warfare at this point because if you just ignore what's gone on up here in the strategic warfare box, actually at this point, strategic warfare counters haven't been built. I'm going to come to what those units over there are in a moment, but assume that they weren't there at the year start sequence. We now come to the rather Byzantine basic resource point calculation. And I've grown grey hairs trying to work this one out, but I think I've got to it. I'm not going to go through the calculation because it's tedious. Suffice to say, I think I've got it correct, and the outcome of it is that Germany began the start of the year with 191 resource points available to spend. The Italians with 94, the British with 127, the French with 119, and the Soviets with 117. So that, I think, was right, which leads then into the strategic warfare construction. Now, this is perhaps the one part of the game where there is a degree of hidden information. So I had to come up and devise a mechanism by which I could calculate how much the Germans and the British would spend on strategic warfare. Each side is allowed to spend a maximum of 10% of their basic resource points at this point on strategic warfare, and I'd made a decision that I'm just going to spend that 10-point limit on both sides. How then to decide what proportion of those to be spent on, in the case of the Germans, submarines and strategic air, and on for the British, anti-submarines and bombers. Well, I just did a D10 or percentage die roll. And the calculation I came up with was that the Germans chose to spend 30% on on submarines, I beg your pardon, and 70% on strategic air, and the British 50% split between anti-submarines and interceptors. The consequence of that being that with 19 points to spend, the Germans, that's 10% of the 191 BRPs they had at this point, they have built 3 submarines and 5 strategic air points. The British, spending 10% of the 127 points they had available, spent their money on 2 anti-submarine points and 2 points of interceptors. And those will play out at the start of 1941 when we cycle back to the strategic warfare resolution phase. Now, I don't know if that's a happy way of organising it, but it's the way I've organised it, and it created an element of fog of war and uncertainty. So I'm going to stick with it. I think it's the best we've got. Once you determine, I've carried out that spend, whatever is then left of your BRPs, each side you divide in half, and that is the maximum amount that each faction or each nation can spend in any one season, the 4 seasons in any year. So the limit for the Germans in any one year is 86 spend in terms of new builds. The Italians can, and there's plenty of points left for the Germans to build. You can see here the units that the allowable builds that the Germans have to spend. The limit for the Italians in any one year is 47 points. As you can see, they have hardly any allowable builds left, so that 47 is going to be a sort of far more than they're going to need. If we switch over to the Allies, the British have a limit of 58 points to spend in any one turn. Again, they've built quite a lot already. That's going to be more than enough. The French 60, but they've only got one replacement garrison point left. And the Russians have spent and built everything already. So they're not going to be building anything more unless anything gets destroyed, which it's not going to be at this point, because war between Germany and the Soviet Union is prohibited unless either side does something stupid, which I don't think we're going to see. So that's the spending limits established, at which point we can move into the game turn proper. We play any variants or certain variants. If I were using them, I'm not. Russian winter die roll. We're not in a winter turn. We're in a spring turn, and anyway, I don't think it would have any impact at this point anyway. We then determine player order, and the way to work that out is you tot up the number of BRPs each side, allies and Axis have available to spend, and whoever has the most has the initiative. So if we top them up, the Allies have more BRPs available than the Germans, and therefore they have the initiative and they will play first. So the Allied player is up, and begin with declarations of war. They're going to declare no declarations of war. All they could do would be to declare war on Italy, but I don't see any benefit to be gained from that at this point. Don't think we're quite strong enough to be doing that down in the Mediterranean or up here on the French-Italian border. So no declarations of war. We would next place any forces of any newly attacked minor countries, but there are, although Belgium and the Dutch were attacked, they were both conquered, so no placement of those forces. No minor allies are activated, so we can now skip to choosing the options on the different fronts. Well, the Eastern Front, obviously the Russians are going to pass, nothing taking place there. In the Mediterranean, similarly, I think it's going to be a pass, obviously because there's no declaration of war being conducted, so unable to conduct anything on with any aggressive intent. So the question now is, what do we do on the Western Front? Well, could pass, could declare an offensive, which would require spending 15 BRPs, and would then allow the French to move and conduct full frontal attacks. We could close the gap here and then conduct an attrition combat. That might be worthwhile, and it will allow us to take this ground here with the fortress space there. So I think that's what we're going to do. We're going to declare attrition option on the Western Front. So next we come to the movement phase. So do I want to reposition some British fleets? We've got the one up in the Orkneys, which I suppose is useful to have there in case, for whatever reason, German fleets wanted to move around the top of Scotland That provides some protection. But I could move the fleet up here, up near Edinburgh, I suppose, down to the east coast. But that would offer the opportunity for the German fleet to attempt to intercept that. But that would be a decision for them. It's a risk for Britain, and the risk is that we lose a fleet in the process. But I'm going to do that. I'm going to move the British fleet down here. Now each port can hold 4 fleets, and that brings up the option now of an attempted interception. So this naval fleet here in Kiel is going to announce an attempted interception, and it's going to attempt, I'm going to just mark it in that hex. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4 hexes away. Now, what I can do as the British is, with the fleet that was already in Harwich, here on the English East Coast, is intercept the interception, or attempt to intercept the interception. And I'm going to mark that with this white cube here. So we're going to have a sort of counter interception. We roll on the interception table, obviously on the 2 to 10 row, that's the distance from the base. So we're intercepting as the British with the pre-existing base here. 1, 2, 3, actually it's 3 hexes away, but it doesn't matter, it's still that. So interception will take place successfully on a 1 to 5. That's successful. So we now have naval combat 9v9 in that hex. So essentially the Harwich-based British fleet intercepting the Kiel-based intercepting German fleet. So here we are. We're going to have this Harwich-based fleet in this location intercepting the German fleet that was attempting to intercept the moving British fleet, which was moving down from Edinburgh, and attempting to intercept it here. So we're going to conduct that naval battle first. So we roll 2 dice. We'll start with the intercepting British fleet from Harwich. The winner is just the highest roll. Each side's naval combat die roll is subject to modification due to the nationality and relative size. The way that works is that the larger sized force is always entitled to a favourable die roll modification if it has at least 1/3 more naval factors. Well, in this case it's 9v9, so no modifier, but DRMs are also based on nationality. Germans get a +2, the British get a +1. So let's start with the British, rolling with a +1. So that's 2 + 1 is 3 against the Germans, who have a +2. 4 + 2 is 6. So that is a +3 for the Germans. So the loser of the naval battle must eliminate naval factors equal to the difference. The winner of the naval battle then eliminates half, fractions rounded down, as many of his own factors as lost. So we're going to have 3 to 1. 3 British factors, and as a result, let me just reduce that from a 9 strength fleet to a 6 strength British fleet. That's in Harwich. And the German fleet is reduced from 9 to 8 strength. Here we go. So the attempted interception of the German fleet has failed. So now the German fleet, now at 8 strength points, can attempt to intercept the moving British fleet at 9. Again, there is no ratio-based modifier, so it's just 8 to 9. So we just roll the dice with +2 for the Germans, and we'll roll the Germans first this time. That's 2 plus 2 is 4, plus 1 for the British. 6 plus 1 is 7, so that's a +3. So the German keelboat is now reduced from 8 to 5, and that British fleet that travelling down from Scotland is reduced to 8 strength points. So I've got a stack here, and that British fleet is reduced to 8. But that successfully makes its way down now because the interception attempt against it failed, and so that has joined the original fleet in Harwich. Now, I'm not sure on the back of that whether it was worthwhile the British moving their fleet, but I mean it's all part of me attempting to get my head around how the game works. So I'm quite happy to be testing things out as we go along. So that was a naval movement. I'm not sure whether I want to do any more naval movement or whether I'm happy with how things stand, which I think is probably the case. Okay, so we now come to the ground and air movement phase, and I think this is the point at which the French will push forward and at least occupy some of those spaces between themselves and the Germans, just to at least try and slow the German advance. Let's start pushing forward. Going to here. Got enough movement points to do that. 1, 2, 3. We're not going to come into Luxembourg. That would require a declaration of war, and I would have had to declare an offensive option, not an attrition option, which I failed to do. This stack will move into Belgium, which of course the French control, having invaded it, and up here into Antwerp. That's all allowed, even though we've got attrition, we've taken attrition action. I think 1, 2, 3, 4, I suppose potentially I could move this. I think that air unit probably is in Paris. So that's providing 1, 2, 3, 4, the cover I need. So that's all fine. Obviously, on the Eastern Front, we chose a pass option, so nothing we can worry about there or need to worry about there. The British, I don't think are going to step into France. They're heavily restricted until 1942 in what they can do in France in terms of joint attacks or anything like that with the French. So I don't think they are going to do anything. And because we declared a attrition option rather than offensive, we can't use sea transport to move them. Sea transport is an offensive option movement where fleets can transport ground and air units from base to base. So even though I might want to move some ground units from Britain to North Africa, that's not going to be possible. So, well, or should I say, is not going to be possible until we come to the strategic redeployment phase, where it is possible. I think I could do a bit of potentially reorganising here. What I might do is move this armoured unit to Portsmouth so it's at a port, so that if I do choose at a later point to transport it, and I may want to get more armoured divisions down to North Africa, it's at a point of embarkation. But other than that, I don't think there is much land and air movement that the Allies, or the British in this instance, are going to do. The French have done their moves. I'm happy enough with all of that for now. So that really is that. All we're now going to do is conduct the attrition combat. So we count up the strength points of the French units that are in contact along the contact line with German units. So we've got 2, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. We come to the attrition resolution table. We're going to be rolling against this column, the 21 to 30, because that's the 21 points that the French have. We're going to roll a dice. 4. So 4, 2C, 1H. That means the Germans have to lose 2 counters some point on the contact line. They can choose which. So I think we'll get rid of that infantry unit down there. I think we want to preserve our armour because they are more expensive. We'll lose that one there. Actually, no, let's... Where are we going to be wanting to make the push? Yeah, we'll lose that one there. So those 2 go back to the force pool and can be rebuilt. So that's the 2C. The 1H element is that the French now pick a hex that the Germans have to vacate. And I think we're going to pick, because I don't want to, the French have to then occupy, and I want to be careful that I'm not occupying. I think we're going to go, is that, yeah, we'll probably take this hex here. So the Germans have to retreat 1 hex. I mean, that one, I mean, it could retreat into there, so I'm not sure it actually would serve me. And then, okay, we could push forward there. If we make them vacate here, then we do push forward and find ourselves slightly surrounded. So, okay, I think we'll vacate there and push forward into the Netherlands. So the French have just inched forward there. I think I'm happy enough with that. So that's the end of the attrition. That's all we now need to concern ourselves with in the combat phase, so we can move straight to the unit construction phase. A reminder at this point that the Russians have built all their units, so they're not going to be building anything. The French have 1 replacement point left, so I'm going to take that, and I'm just going to place it. It can be placed excuse me, in any supplied hex that is not in a zone of control. Only armour exerts zone of control. So I think I'm going to plant it here in this, just to increase the strength of that defensive line in the fortress area. That's a foot infantry unit, so that doesn't exert a zone of control. So that's a legal placement. The British, right, Reminder that the maximum they can spend in any one turn is 58 points, so that's not going to be a problem because they've got simply 1 3/4 infantry and a 4/5 armour. So that's easily, and then they've got a whole bunch of replacement points. I'm not going to worry about those for the time being. Got to be placed in their home country, so I'm not going to be able to place them in North Africa. So let's position. I'm going to place this in Portsmouth, this infantry unit in Portsmouth, and I'm going to place this armour unit in London. So that's the construction phase completed, which brings us to the strategic redeployment phase. Allied anti-submarine warfare counters can move to and in spring from the Murmansk box. Well, we're not going to be sending anything to Murmansk. We can do some Lend-Lease movement. We're not going to be doing that. But we can redeploy some of our units on the basis of the following calculation. The British can move 7 units. They can only move over controlled supplied hexes, including hexes controlled by an ally. Any SR'd unit, ground, air or naval, may not be adjacent to nor pass adjacent to any enemy unit, including air, naval, airbase, counter or partisan at the start, end or at any point. However, note that a unit is not adjacent to an enemy unit if the enemy is a future enemy not yet at war. So Italy, that's not going to be a problem because we're not yet at war. Ground units may not cross any all-water hex side during SE without sea escort. The way it works is that each 9-factor fleet may sea escort 1 unit counter of any size. Lesser fleets, i.e. anything less than 9 factors, cannot perform sea escort. The unit must be able to move to the escorting fleet's base by controlled land hexes. So what I want to do is I want to move this armour unit with an escort from this fleet up here. Now, this unit can move up to by controlled land hexes, so that's fine. So it is being escorted by this fleet to Gibraltar. So effectively, that one fleet is escorting that to Gibraltar. The fleet that's doing the escort then has to return back to the base from where it started. At this point, now that was able to do that because it hadn't taken another action. If you remember the fleet here at Harwich, for example, I mean, one, it couldn't do it because it was reduced earlier on during the sea movement and interception, so it's not full strength. What's more, though, because it took part in an interception, that was its action for the turn. But this piece up here in Liverpool hadn't done anything, hadn't acted in the turn, so was able to act as the escort. So the armoured unit has arrived here in Gibraltar, and then one of these fleets in Gibraltar can relay and move this piece, and it's fine. We can we can ignore the presence of Italy pieces for now because we're not yet at war with Italy, but we're going to move it and we're going to bring it to the Port Said here, drop it there, and then its sea escort returns back to Gibraltar. I think that looks to me like pretty much the only transport I can do through using strategic redeployment. So that comes to an end, and then for the end of the turn there'd be just a little bit of clearing up, bridgehead counters, repair the Kiel Canal, Suez Canal if those had been damaged. They haven't been, and so there really quite quickly the Allied turn has come to an end. Really the only movement having been a little bit of naval repositioning, obviously that strategic redeployment of an armoured unit down there after the British did a bit of construction. And on the Western Front, the French conducted a bit of attrition, took out a couple of German infantry pieces, made a bit of a push in the Netherlands. But I suspect now with the Germans, we're going to see them doing a fairly significant, and I don't think it'll be attrition. I suspect it will be an offensive operation. And the thing for the Germans is they have a large amount of pieces in the force pool that they can rebuild, and plenty of money with which to do it. So that's the end of the spring 1940 turn for the Allies. We'll be back for the Axis later on.